Well, hello, folks. My name is Jen Lewis, and I'm Executive Director of StageSource. I hope you all got a good chuckle at my expense this morning. I really, honestly hope you did. We all need a good laugh these days. I've been a staff member of StageSource off and on for the last 20 years and have been in this position as interim executive director since September. For those of you that I know, I really look forward to seeing you again. And those of you I don't, look forward to meeting you. As we get started with our We're Back panel discussion, community conversation, I wanted to start with a land acknowledgement, as is our tradition. We may often overlook that this land was inhabited by Native Americans and Indigenous people for hundreds of generations before Europeans arrived on its shores. This is reflected in some of the place names we use today, including Massachusetts, Mattapan, Merrimack, Neponset, Chalmette. This land is the territory of the Massachusetts, Pawtucket, and their neighbors, the Wampanoag and Nipmuc peoples, who have stewarded this land for generations. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by invaders that have impacted the original inhabitants of this land for 400 years. We recognize the repeated violations of sovereignty, territory, and water perpetrated by invaders that have, repeated that. We extend our respect to citizens of these nations who live here today and their ancestors who have lived here for over 5 generations, and to all Indigenous people. We also affirm that this acknowledgement is insufficient. It does not undo the harm that has been done and continues to be perpetrated now against Indigenous people, their land, and water. I suggest that you look into the Indigenous people of your area if that's not something that is part of your practice already. So, with that said, I'd like to introduce our first 3 panelists. The format of today will be that we first have, not 3 panelists, 3 presenters. We have 3 folks who are sharing some of their knowledge and expertise with us. And then we will go on to a panel with our, with 3 theater company representatives who will talk about what has been going on for their organizations currently and present some questions that have been sent into us and some others that have come out of our conversations. And that will be hosted by Jasmine Bonner, our staff member. So without further ado, I introduce Cara Elliott Ortega, who is our Chief of Arts and Culture for the City of Boston. Thank you for coming with us, Cara.
Thanks so much. I'm happy to be here and talking with you all and recognize some names, but a lot I don't recognize, which is great. So I'm Cara, the Cabinet Chief for Arts and Culture for the City of Boston, and also manage the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture for the city. And I know that it's been a super challenging time this winter to have to cancel things or push things back and just be kind of in the unknown again. But we've been working really hard to support cultural organizations and artists and creative communities around the city of Boston. And there are some things coming up that I just wanted to make sure are on your radar, and just want to extend an invitation to anyone who's listening to this who has not connected with the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture to definitely reach out and connect with us so we know who you are and what your needs are right now. So I'll just jump in with a couple of updates. We're in the process of sending grant notifications totaling $3.4 million, and that's through our Boston Cultural Council funds and through Reopen Creative Boston, which is the American Rescue Plan funding, federal funding that then came to the city, and then $3 million, which was specifically put aside to support the arts sector. And that's a part of our role, and something that we're always looking to work with people on is advocacy for increasing that relief funding that's going specifically to arts and culture. And I know that the other folks on this call will talk about that as well. Some of those funds are focused on organizations with operating budgets under $2 million a year. So we have seen a part of our purpose really focusing on organizations that normally don't get access to other sources of funding or other sources of philanthropy. And that's been something that we really prioritized in the last 2 years. And then, of course, because of the impact of COVID, focusing on performing arts organizations, organizations that work with youth, and those that have facilities costs and specific overhead costs that have been hard to maintain over the last 18 months. We also have a few opportunities for individual artists coming up. And I think the good news is that we see a lot of pent up energy to come out and do things in public and getting ready for spring and summer. So we actually just received 450 200-ish applications from artists for professional development support and support for bringing free community events out to the public. But we want to make sure that in addition to some of that programmatic support, we're also providing more centralized services for creative workers or maybe unincorporated groups or startups in arts and culture. So we have a request for proposals out right now for $500,000 in contracts to support a whole bunch of wraparound services. So that includes equity, diversity, and inclusion training for creative professionals, business development services, professional development for arts educators and teaching artists, tax and legal assistance, networking and industry collaboration, a whole set of things that's out right now to find the providers who can help provide that support to creative workers in and around Boston. So we'll hopefully have those contracts underway soon and have updates about how you can tap into those services, hopefully starting over the summer. And then 2 other things, I'll try to go really fast. One is the Strand Theater. So I think most folks know that the city operates the Strand Theater in Upham's Corner in Dorchester. It's a 1,400-seat theater. And we're going to be making some funding available soon for those who want to use that space and for whom, finances might have been a barrier in the past. And we're also just interested in connecting and kind of figuring out what else the building can hold. So if you're interested in having a walkthrough, we'd love to connect and hear what you want to do. And it doesn't just have to be performances, but read-throughs, rehearsals, talks, other things that can happen in the ancillary spaces of the theater. We're really, really interested in hosting. And so I'll follow up with StageSource and see if we can circulate an email about that once that opportunity is open. But basically want help testing new arrangements for how we use space in the theater. And then lastly, marketing and communications. And we know, like I said, there's a lot of pent up energy, I think, both for the people who are making the work, a lot of people who are listening to this, and also, the people who want to be out there actually being full humans again and being in person and watching things and participating. So we're talking at the city level about how we can help lift up all of those programs and events, particularly looking at spring and summer, and making sure that we're playing a role in marketing and messaging this kind of second, third, hopefully, don't issue this again, framing this as a comeback moment, but really want to make sure that people really know what's available to them as we get into warmer months. So we have a couple of members of our team listening in as well, Julia Ryan and Tom Johnston. So we're here to listen and hear what other needs you have and how it can be useful to us. And again, please reach out if you haven't connected with us before. And yeah, we look forward to hearing the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Cara. Next, we'll hear from Michael Bobbitt with some of the state perspective. Michael is the ED of the Massachusetts Cultural Council.
Hey friends, how are you? All my theater peeps, my favorite, not my favorites. I can't say who my favorites are, but I love you all. Today, first of all, I want to say Happy New Year to anyone celebrating the Lunar New Year. My family and I celebrate the Tet, the Vietnamese New Year's. Also, today is the 1-year anniversary of my start with Mass Cultural Council. So we just posted thank you. We just posted a letter to the sector and everyone that supports the sector. So I'm putting that in the chat. I'll do my best to navigate all the windows I have open. Just to give you a few highlights of things programs we have initiated or completed or working on. Super excited that we have developed the agency's first racial equity plan, which I will also post in the chat. So we're in the process of executing that, and on our website you can see where we are in that process. Then, and part of that process, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, a lot of operational efficiency, internal operational efficiency, specifically our new grants management system, which I hope you all liked and benefited from. We'll be eliciting feedback on that as we go through. I'm also super excited and proud that I got to work with Emily Ruddick at Mass Creative to secure $20 million in our state appropriations, which is $1.8 million more than last year, and the first time we've been in the 20s since the 1980s, which is amazing. And then, of course, I hope you all know, we, with Emily's help, we secured $60.1 million for pandemic relief for artists and cultural organizations from the state. We're still collecting feedback from the community on how to spend the pandemic relief money. And here's a link to that information that we're soliciting feedback through the 7th. So please write us and tell us how you think we should spend that money. And then the other thing I'm super proud of is we doubled our investment in our individual artist fellowship program. We gave out higher awards and twice the number of grants this year. Super exciting. Future priorities for us. We are heavily working on recruitment and relationship building into communities that either aren't in our portfolio or have been historically underfunded. We're continuing with our equity goals and expanding that by working on our deaf and disability plan and our rural engagement plan. And then part of the racial equity plan, we're undergoing an intense review of all of our grant programs from soup to nuts, so that we can make sure that we're looking at our grant making, everything from eligibility requirements to the grant application to the final report. One, to make it all easier from a customer service perspective, but two, to make sure that we are looking at everything from a equity, inclusion, and diversity lens as well. And then next fall, we launch the agency's new strategic planning process. We extended the current strategic plan for a year so I can get to know the agency and get to know you all. So next year we'll start our new plan. We're working with Emily some more on advocacy engagement of the whole sector and in all government levels, because the budget process started. We started out really good with the governor recommending a 25% increase from last year's recommendation, which was pretty amazing. And then I'm also working to develop partnerships with community leaders, people like chambers of commerce, the education sector, philanthropists, programs that focus on health and well-being, and then also really going deeper with federal, state, and municipal and regional leaders. I really encourage you all to sign up for our newsletter. We do lots of blog posts, but that's the best place to find out when the grants are being launched. Also, you can join us on social media at the various sites we have, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and YouTube. And then feel free to reach out to me directly. I think that was all I had open to share with you. Okay, great. I'm done. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Michael. And for those of you who might not know, Michael comes from theater and was executive artistic director of New Rep before he moved into this role. So it's very nice to have an advocate on the state level, much appreciated. And next we have Emily Ruddick, who is the executive director of Mass Creative. Emily,
hello.
Take it over.
Hi, all. Thanks for the opportunity to join this conversation. So I'm as my co-panelists just dubbed me, a little bit of an overachiever, and I have some slides to share. So if you'll give me a second, I'm gonna pop those up. And okay, 1 second. You're gonna see a flash of my screen and then I'll get it in place. Brace yourselves. Okay, here we go. So as Michael, so I'm going to try to talk to you about a couple of things that are happening really on the state level that might be of interest to you around sort of like how it's going to impact your work, your organizations. And then at the end, I'm going to sort of like talk a little bit about how advocacy can sort of, how you can engage in some of the advocacy that we're doing. So first of all, as Michael mentioned, just last week, Governor Baker released his H2 budget, which is what is traditionally his budget proposal for the second year of a legislative session. In Massachusetts, we have a 2-year legislative session. I'll get into what that actually means in a moment. But basically, the good news is, as Michael mentioned, is that for the first time, Governor Baker made a recommendation to invest in the arts and culture community via the Mass Cultural Council above $20 million. So thank you, Governor Baker. As you can see on this chart, this kind of like lays out exactly what the process is going to be from moving from now on, right? So, you know, he's releasing his budget, then the Joint Ways and Means committees, which are committees of both the Senate and the House, are going to take hearings. Michael is going to get a chance to present and make his recommendation or the agency's recommendation for what the budget should be, and then it'll move along. All the way along here, there are opportunities for you to advocate, and Mass Creative can also send you some of those opportunities to advocate. As Michael put in the chat, one of the first ones is like the easiest advocacy you can do, which is thanking someone for doing what you want them to do. So don't sleep on thanking Governor Baker. It does matter that we don't just show up and ask for things or say you did a bad job, but it matters that we show up and say like, you did what we wanted, and that is great. So please do that. The other thing I want to talk about that Michael talked a little bit about is ARPA, right? The American Rescue Plan Act. So we worked, all of us, and many of us on this call were involved in advocating for a significant part of the American Rescue Plan Act that the Commonwealth received to be allocated to the Mass Cultural Council. And we were able to secure 60 million for grants. There was an additional amount that was included for earmarks to specific organizations or specific projects, but there's 60 million. And please comment about what you think should happen with that 60 million to the Mass Cultural Council. That's an amazing piece of what makes our state arts agency different from a lot of other state agencies. They're actually interested in feedback from the field. So we need to answer that call. But it's also important to notice that the 60 million was like 10% of what a commission that was charged to study the impact of COVID-19 actually suggested, right? Like they suggested 575 million. So we still have a little ways to go, right? The other thing is that all of the ARPA funds that Massachusetts received haven't been fully assigned. We don't know what the timeline is. We don't know if they'll take up like an ARPA 2.0, as it's being called, before the end of the session, and the session will end at like 2 a.m. on July 1st, or if they're going to wait and do it in the fall, or if they're going to wait and do it in the new session, which will start on January 1st. So that's unclear, but we're still like monitoring that and paying attention to that. I am going to talk about this end of the legislative session. So as I said, we have a 2-year legislative session at the beginning. It starts in January, and then it officially goes through December of that first year, through the end of that second year, that December of that second year. So in January of 2022, it'll be the end of the 2-year legislative session. And what does that mean? First of all, it means that any legislation that was filed at the beginning of the session, if something hasn't happened to it, it dies. So you don't get any more, right? Like you can't, that bill, you're going to have to refile it if you want to see it become a law. There are a couple of pieces of legislation that both are hot topics for the legislature and that we're watching as well. It also means that at the end of the session, all of those legislators have to go and either run for re-election or announce that they're not running, and new people have an opportunity to run for re-election. So 2 of the bills that we're watching really carefully, and I'll tell you why, are sports betting and the economic development bond bill. So sports betting is like a hotly contested issue. The House loves the idea of allowing sports betting to come to Massachusetts. The Senate seems very unhappy about the idea of actually passing that legislation. But that means it's a potential bargaining chip between the 2 chambers. And what we are looking at is there a way that we can attach a piece of the revenue that's collected, the tax revenue that's collected from that sports betting, to be channeled in or funneled in to support arts and culture? We're working on it, but we're working right now in a quiet phase, but I'm paying attention to that sports betting, and I hope you will too. The other thing is that every 2 years there's an economic development bond bill that's filed. That's actually where the Cultural Facilities Fund is technically reauthorized and funded from. According to the calculations that I have, we don't actually need a reauthorization yet. We're like 2 years away. But again, it's interesting to note that Governor Baker actually included a reauthorization of the Cultural Facilities Fund in his economic development bond bill that he just filed. So we're going to pay attention to that a little bit too. So I mentioned, right, elections, they matter. And the reason they matter is because the people who are elected make decisions about the money that is spent, right, of the tax revenues that are spent. So in 2022, in November of 22, all statewide elections, that includes governor, lieutenant governor, auditor, secretary of state, attorney general, and treasurer, I think I got them all, will all be up for re-election, as will all legislative offices. Now, we know Governor Baker isn't running yet, or isn't running. He's announced he's not running, and Lieutenant Polito is not running either. So those are going to be 2 open seats. And in Massachusetts, when there's an open seat, there tends to be a lot more activity around that election. There are also a lot of legislators who are not seeking re-election. They've either become the ambassador to Ireland or joined the Biden administration in another facet, or they've chosen to go into the private sector, or they're choosing to retire. And so these are all opportunities. All of these people who are running for these seats are going to be interested in what voters and their constituents, depending if it's statewide or local, want to see them do. And so I don't know about you, but this last election season, I got so many calls asking me if I was registered to vote and if I was going to vote for a certain candidate. And every single one of those sweet volunteers got a lady who said, please tell me what your candidate's arts and cultural platform is. Now, their answer was most likely, we don't really know, we'll get back to you. And what they had to do is they had to go back to the campaign manager and say, we just got a call about arts and cultural policy. What's the candidate's position on that? And either they were like, oh, here's here's what their position is, or, oh my gosh, we need to think about that. That's an important part of this process. And it's why we run Create the Vote. And we're going to do that again for statewide elections. So check that out and take a look. We will have more information. You'll see a statewide announcement coming soon. It's not there yet, but you can bookmark that page. The other thing I just want to like run through a couple of other advocacy pieces, which is, if you sign up for our emails, you are going to get, we try not to spam you. We try to just provide you with the necessary information and necessary ways to get involved. And occasionally we ask you to support our work financially. We also have a bi-weekly straight up 15-minute policy and action Zoom every other Friday. The next one will be on February 11th that you can like get more of these details. In fact, all the slides I showed you, if you came to our Zooms, you've seen them before. The other thing I wanted to say that has nothing to do with Mass Creative is make sure you know who your elected officials are, and make sure you have a sense of like what their purview is, right? Like Congresswoman Presley is amazing and is doing phenomenal work on the federal level, but she's not going to necessarily be the one who's voting on the bill about how the city of Boston allocates their ARPA dollars. That's going to involve the mayor of Boston and the city councilors, right? And so there's a quick and easy way that you can figure out, are you registered, and who your elected officials are. And so that is my quick and dirty. I will also include my email when I stop talking. We are always interested in hearing from you and hearing how we can better service you as your advocacy resource. Thank you. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Thank you all so much. I didn't tell you I was going to do this, but if I can ask you one last question, what is your call to action right now? I think I've written down 5 things, Emily, but if there is one thing that our sector, that all of our staff members, all of our independent artists can do, or perhaps to advocate for the funding that we need, what would you say those are? So we'll go in backwards order because I think Emily's probably got those a little faster. So Emily, and then Michael, and then Cara.
Really selfishly sign up for our email. And the reason is that at the moment, the top thing related to like the most immediate funding item or action is going to be that thank you note to Governor Baker. And as I said, like that matters, but like we're about to launch into a budget season. We're about to launch into the end of the legislative season. And so we'll have more updates as we go. So that would be the first one. And then the other one is as we start to engage in elections, and let's be real clear, in nonpartisan ways, like we never endorse a candidate, we never provide financial or in-kind support to candidates, but think about how your organization can sort of mobilize the amazing networks and audiences that you have to say, like, what happens if every one of your audience members, when they get that call from a volunteer, says like, I love Speakeasy Stage, I've been, an audience member and a subscriber at Gloucester Stage for 20 years, and I'm really worried about the creative sector. What are you going to do about it? That would be an amazing shift. So those are the things I would say right now.
Great. Thank you, Cara. I'm sorry. Thank you, Emily. Back to Michael.
I would say, yeah. So one, I need to hear from you regarding the ARPA money. Please respond. Please send me a note so we can actually use that information. Secondly, I would say sign up for Emily's emails and do whatever she tells you to do in her emails, because that is the most important thing to do. And third, I would say, really, if you haven't figured out how to make getting to know your state legislators as part of your regular job, you're losing out on many, many, many opportunities, and you're losing out on helping the whole sector advocate for more. Decisions are made by the people who show up in the room. And so show up at the public square by signing up for Emily's emails and getting to know your state legislators. Get coffee with them, get a Zoom call with them. They will give you that time. That's it.
Thank you, Michael. And back to Cara at the city level. Do you have a bullet point or two for us?
I was also going to say, do whatever Emily tells you to do, but also be a member of Mass Creative, because we see results from having Emily being able to do this work. And that also takes buy-in from an entire community of people supporting that level of advocacy. On the local level, I would say the same thing: get to know your elected officials, reach out to your city councilors, try to get some of their time, and just think about the extent to which other people are reaching out to them and demanding their time all the time. And the arts needs to show up at that level and be part of like the concerns of daily civic life for your elected officials. So I would just back that up at the local level as well.
Thank you, Cara. I will say I went to one of the Mass Creative days when we all learned how to advocate. What was that called? When we used to do things in person back in the day.
Advocacy Day.
Thank you. Advocacy. There you go. Yeah, clearly very awake this morning. And what I learned most was basically tell your own story to your legislators, because there's an awful lot of legislators who believe that, that the arts is sort of, theaters in New York primarily, or there's some local, but it doesn't impact my suburban district. It doesn't impact my community. And so the more we can say, I live here and I vote and I count on this for my living and or my joy in life to these people, and we want it in our schools, et cetera, all of the above can be really powerful.
And if it's okay, can I just tag on to what you just said, because I think it's really important. The reason that the legislature allocated $60 million of recovery funding to the sector is for two reasons. One, there was a very strong data case made thanks to the data collected by the Mass Cultural Council. So all of the times that your organizations replied to the survey and you took that extra moment to fill that out, that helped paint a picture. But number two is I'm pretty positive that I can go back and the majority of legislators heard from at least two people, many heard from more, saying this is a real concern of mine and here's why, and told their personal stories. And so every legislator who walked in there was like, hey, Speaker Mariano, Senate President Spilka, Ruddick, and Michaelwitz, I'm hearing about this from my district and from my constituents. Are we going to include recovery money for the arts and cultural sector? So that chain is the reason we got what we got. And so those personal stories make a huge difference.
Great. Thank you so much, Emily. All right, so there's some about the sector, the government positions and what's going on at the moment in terms of funding. At StageSource, obviously funding, we are very aware that funding is a huge need for our community, but also we know that we are creative people and can do a lot without a lot, even though we're tired of it. So I wanted to get together some of our producing organizations who have been working through this period to talk a little bit about how things are going for them, what their needs are, what they're finding, what creative solutions they have worked out, and talk with us as a group about how we can support each other and work together in this crazy freelance world where we often don't really get together. And with that, I will hand it over to Jasmine Bonner, who is our programs manager. Jasmine.
Good morning, everyone. Hold on, I have two computers going. So I have to mute myself so I don't hear myself in the background. Neither do you. I'm so happy to be joining you guys this morning. I'm also so glad to be joined by Courtney and Paul, Courtney representing Lyric Stage and Paul representing Speakeasy. We are waiting for just one more panelist, of course, in the wonderful world of Zoom and emails. Sometimes they get lost in spam. And so hopefully we will see Armando, who's representing Theatro Chelsea, joining us very shortly. But let's get kicked off. Let's start talking. And I want to take you back to a time as you were planning for FY22, where we are today, and hear from you guys. What was your original plan as you were approaching this season? And maybe talk about the original plan and how that's changed. There you are, Armando. So good to see you. You are just in time. Starting with our first question, what was your original plan as you are approaching FY22 and how has that changed? Courtney, do you want to start? I'm just going to pick on you because I know you best.
Sure. Thank you for having us today. StageSource, thank you for doing this. And Kara, Michael, and Emily, that was amazing. Thank you all so much, first of all. It's hard to remember back to when we were looking at sort of that initial draft of fiscal 22, because I think, probably like most people, we redrafted our budgets and we re-looked at what 22 was going to look like about 10 different times, sort of looking through different lenses as things changed. And I think that one of the things that was very helpful for us was that our board and our staff and everyone agreed that it was an ongoing conversation, that it was not a one and done conversation, that everything would have to be shifting as circumstances shifted. I mean, I can tell you, we did not budget as much money as we needed for testing, right? Like we didn't figure that into our budget as much. And if we were doing it now, we certainly would. But but at that time we didn't know. So the budget evolved, and it evolved as more information became available. It evolved as, frankly, as funds became available, right? As we got payroll protection and as we got shuttered venues, everything sort of shifted as we did that. And it's just been an ongoing conversation.
Thank you. Paul?
Hello, and thanks to everybody else who's presented so far. We started planning our season with the assumption that the fall would not be a normal operations. We'd have increased costs for health and safety measures. We would have decreased audience attendance if people were nervous to come back. And everything, actually, we planned to have a not normal year, and that's exactly what happened. We had very modest attendance, but we made all of our goals, and we programmed shows that had a very small cast size, and we were able to have a couple understudies here and there, and we went through just fine. We did not plan to be in even more severe restrictions in terms of health and safety permitted activities for our workers, and double or sometimes triple cost for testing and personal protective equipment. And that, unfortunately, that's where we are right now. So our approved budget was, by the time January rolls around, we're going to guess that we'll be pretty much back to normal, and we'll be doing larger, more ambitious shows, all of those really cool shows, and the big musical that we were going to do back in 2020, we're going to move them in. And now we are facing some pretty significant challenges. We postponed a show by about a month. We've incurred, I would say, between $25,000 and $30,000 of additional expenses, and that is with vendors, partners, spaces being incredibly flexible and generous. And we are, at some point, we were down to our last 12 rapid tests, and we were only testing people every single day when they walked in the building, to avoid a full and complete shutdown because of presumptive transmission within our workplace. So so we are cautiously optimistic, and we are planning to perform every single production, to hire every single artist, to have a backup for every single role, and to do that through to June. However, we are going to be struggling with the financial ramifications for that, and we are still uncertain as to whether our audiences are going to return and respond as we have anticipated. That said, we're also planning for the next season, and we are uncertain as to how much of this is, again, a time-limited thing, and how much of this is going to be structural into what is just the realities of producing theater. So that's the summary of where Speakeasy Stage Company has been for the last couple of months.
And Armando?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think probably as definitely the youngest of the theater companies around, I think that has come to our benefit, that we hadn't announced a full season, so we played things close to our chest with projects that, you know, we knew we wanted to still keep some of them hybrid. Our original plan, like we had a Christmas show planned. We also had like a cafe teatro, like, you know, food sort of style cabaret, and that was for February, so that isn't happening. But I think, you know, one of the ways that we've pivoted is leaning on partnerships with more established companies like our parent company, the Apollinaire Theater Company. When we lost basically a main stage slot, we look towards, okay, is there a way that we can do a co-pro or work together, you know, continue, you know, our work trying to, you know, uplift Latinx stories, and would the Apollinaire be willing to add something like that to their season and combine missions for a show while still satisfying, you know, what we need to do for our fundraising purposes, to our grants and everything. And then thankfully just, you know, keeping things very local and community based, you know, knowing that, you know, if our house size is going to be 40, you know, we try to keep our size to that level, and we stay local. We invite local organizations and groups, and try to keep, you know, our audiences predictable in that regard. But yeah, I think, I mean, we've just been nimble and being transparent, you know, with even our, you know, with our boards and our teams, and being like, let's see what we can do. And yeah, just again, leaning on our partnerships, being very adaptive to, you know, changing some plans. And I think that's just a benefit of being a very young and a smaller company. We're not beholden to subscribers just yet, and that comes to our benefit a little bit.
I love that. Keep it nimble. So my next question for you guys, because I always like to celebrate what's working. So tell me about a success that you've had so far this season. Something that's worked for you. Courtney, you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mean, I think the fact that we've been able to open shows is, I mean, you know, it sounds like a baseline for success, but it's true. It's been hugely successful to be able to open any productions this fall. And you know, we share that success with so many companies across the board. It's been a lot of shifting, of pivoting, and I think that's, you know, like Armando and Paul were saying, it's a lot of just being responsive to the moment. And I think that's a success that we've had, is trying to stay in the current moment that we're in and not trying to go too far in advance, because if we've learned anything, it's that we don't know what's around the corner. And, you know, it's both a success and we fail at it every day. And then every day we get a little more successful with it. But I think just simply being able to open our doors to welcome artists and audiences back in has been a huge success, and has been something that we are inordinately proud of and grateful for at the same time, for everything that's allowed that to happen.
Thank you. Paul? Oh, we were on mute.
I think the greatest success we've had is that we have, despite the many challenges, been able to get artists into a room together where, despite whatever stuff is happening outside, once they got into the room and the doors were closed and we engaged in the work, people felt safe, comfortable, protected. I'll be honest with you, that is a given in normal times, right? And it has required an enormous amount of work and logistics. And it's also very transitory. And there are many moments in which, unfortunately, that atmosphere is broken, right? I've had to go into rehearsal multiple times saying, okay, folks, well, somebody tested positive on their way in, so we turned them away. And so they'll not be here in rehearsal. Here's what we know, and here's when they were last tested, and here's what's happening, right? So there has been, I think the greatest success is when we were not to try and avoid those issues, but to try and deal with them as quickly and comprehensively as possible, so that we could let everybody know that this is where it, and I hate to say it, but as employers in the pandemic world, in many ways, I think what we are able to do is better than many other workplaces, right? And it pains me to say that, because I don't want to say that. I want to say this, that no job should ever have any aspect of risk, beyond the exciting, challenging, artistic risks we take, right? But until we can afford to, do theater in a bubble at Disney like the NBA did, right? I think we are people who work and live in and around the city of Boston and have lives and schools and families and other jobs and side gigs and teaching and go shopping. And so we've been able to make our environment, I would say, the safest workplace that anybody has come to, but we also have to understand that it's not 100% safe, and that is nerve-wracking. The other challenge I'll say is just logistically, we found a place that would sell us tests. We found a lab that, although it was it's a lot of time and effort to figure it out, will get us a PCR result usually in 24 hours or less, which can mean the difference between, everybody staying home for one day on the day off or canceling 4 performances. So I'm proud of our ability to do that, though I wish that it was, something that was not just us sort of figuring all the stuff out on our own.
Thank you, Paul. Armando?
Yeah, for me, I think the thing that I'm probably would consider a really awesome success is in this time of uncertainty, and I think we saw a lot of excitement in the fall for returning to work. And one of the coolest things is, like, there's a lot of BIPOC work out there right now. Like, and it's like awesome to hear that. It's awesome. When we were looking to cast for some of our readings, like, people were like, I got to balance. It was it's always good to say when a friend says no because they got work. But the communities that we've been able to build within our cast, like, speaking to what Courtney and Paul, like, people are, as artists, we're very happy to be back in the room. Like, there's, everyone felt those strong emotions when you're like, this is the first time I've been back in a rehearsal room. This is the first time I've taken a 5 or a 10, like a real 5 or a 10 in a space. And it's just really beautiful to see those connections, how, being able to foster those connections. I'm like, there's a whole email thread right now of one of the casts of our shows, like, just checking in on each other, just checking in. And I can't remember the last time I had a cat, like, I saw casts, like, communicating with each other, passing along work. I think that's a really great success on my part, on our company. It's like, even if we're not producing shows, we do get emails, people asking questions and about, like, looking for BIPOC folks to be in a show. And I've been very happy that I've been able to pass along those inquiries and generate bookings for fellow artists, and provide work in a very uncertain time, whether that be small or large, theater or film. I think that's been a great success, being able to just expand individual artist network in a much faster and expansive way than we saw prior to the pandemic. And I hope that's a trend that continues to happen as we go into the future.
I would say it almost feels like the first week of college when everyone is so excited to be there. But it's like lasted 2 years. So now more people than you would have ever been able to meet in such a short period of
been a long orientation week.
Long orientation week, 2 years orientation. All right. So my next question for you guys is, knowing that, fundraising, making money, sort of recouping on your sort of financial needs is going to be, maybe a number one challenge, right? Like, we already know that money is always sort of a challenge on the table. What are the number 2 and number 3 challenges that you are facing?
Jasmine, I'm going to jump in. And actually, before I get into that, I'm just going to expand Temple on your question about testing, which is one of the challenges. Right now, like I said, it's probably costing us about $500 a week for what we're doing. And that's we've had extremely small casts. The largest cast size that we've had is 4 people. And so our teams have been relatively small. There will be 1 week this spring or 2 weeks where we will have 2 large productions, including a musical with a band and everything in testing at the same time. And I'm estimating that the cost that week will cost us somewhere around $1,200 for the week in testing for 1 week. And I think that sort of goes to right into your question, Jasmine, about what are the other challenges. And one of them is just everything is a little more complicated. Everything is a little more difficult, and it takes a little bit longer and more pre-planning, right? You kind of can't be as spontaneous. It's not just thinking about who's in the room. It's thinking about who is tested this day. Do we have someone on site who can test? Do we have everything lined up? Do we have enough test kits? There are days where I feel like I think more about COVID and testing than anything else in my life. And that's really challenging on multiple levels. So I think that, and it all, of course, ties back to the financial picture, right? It all ties back to, as Paul said, we planned for lower audiences, we planned for smaller shows, but we didn't plan for it to be this long and this far into the season. And so I think that my sort of second and third concerns are just time and the extra time that everything takes. And then frankly, the fatigue. I think we're all seeing 2 years in the emotional fatigue that we're feeling. And we have these moments of people being in rooms and it being really spectacular and glorious and being able to focus on work and feeling like that energy is there. And then all of a sudden it takes just one moment for us to be sort of pulled out of it and to sort of feel that the weight of 2 years of this coming back. And this is not something that's only affecting our industry. I mean, I think it's affecting us all personally. It's affecting, certainly educators and parents and healthcare workers, and so many industries are being affected by it. And I think that so that fear of the fatigue, that as we head towards the second half of this season, and as we start looking at where we're going in the future, it's the fear of the fatigue is huge on my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul.
I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah, please.
I think one of the greatest I think a great challenge is building redundancy. I mean, it's not about just planning a plan A or a plan B anymore. It's like, and sometimes you're planning like 7 contingencies, and that's a very big, that's a very heavy systems load, an operations load. Especially, because again, Courtney's right. It goes back to finances. Like, all these things cost money and time. And some, you're building contingencies for hopefully things you don't want to execute on. But you have to plan for it, because then you're just left on a lurch if you hadn't planned for it, and that's going to have severe ripple effects. Leaving open time in a theater schedule to like have the space available in case you have to delay. I mean, planning for understudies, all these things cost extra on top of it. But I think really it's about a systems, like creating all those contingencies and creating all these like plans and A, B's, and C's. I know that's a heavy load. That's probably the biggest challenge that I foresee. It's just there's just a lot of we have to have a lot more conversations, conversations than you're used to, that don't necessarily always feel like what we were all trained to do. None of us were trained as healthcare workers, but here we are, having COVID compliance officers and having discussions about what is the safety of the space? Can we you know, do it by humidifiers? Like what is the solution here? Knowing full well that we're not experts on it. So I think, yeah, that's a big one that just comes to mind.
Thank you. Paul?
All right, so second and third things are, I think the second thing is thinking ahead to the future. And although there's a challenge, I do think there is some hopefully future good for this, is how much of the added cost in terms of operational cost, backups, is becoming structural to running a workforce, you know, dependent cultural institution, which is, you know, shorthand for like theater is all about people. It's all people. And I remember, I'm trying to remember when it was, there was like a while ago, there was a big report on the state of culture. I think it was like Marty Walsh, the whole, when that, it was like the state of culture. And one of the big takeaways was there's so many cultural organizations in Massachusetts, and the biggest contributor to the group as a whole are the people who work in arts. And that was like, wait, what? I thought the other people gave us money. But there are so many arts and cultural jobs that are done on a fee basis, as volunteer, for free. Artists are their own entrepreneurs, people who are, you know, have the privilege to work at an arts organization and actually get paid a salary, but who there's the tacit understanding that you are doing work for less money reward because of the non-tangible rewards, which are very real, but that your skills and abilities would be higher, would claim a higher reward in the for-profit sector. So therefore you are contributing the difference by working for arts, right? And it feels like a lot of that is going out the window when all of a sudden there are additional intangible costs to working, in addition to those wonderful benefits of being fulfilled as a human being, right? Now you have to worry about your safety. Now you have to worry about increasing your bubble. Now you have to worry about, you know, finding childcare is a nightmare. And then what do you happen when the babysitter tests positive, right? Like all of that stuff are sort of in the negative column. And I think that I've seen more and more people just say flat out, nope, love to work with you guys again, like I've worked for you in many, many years, but I just can't do it. Won't do it. It's not worth it. Can't do it. So our organization, thankfully, is in a good cash position because of one-time funding that was specifically tailored for the pandemic as a one-time event. But I think that there is going to be a situation of expectation of, well, can I take a sick day? Where's my understudy? You know, even if the pandemic is 3 years in our rearview mirrors, is there going to be the same cost borne by institutions who might just have run the risk of doing a 3 or 4 week show without having a backup or an understudy or another person to sub in? So as I'm working on the like a 1 year budget and then a 10-year budget, I just feel like I've never in my career been less informed about how much it actually costs to run my company, because I can't anticipate how many of these things are going to fall off in the next 3 to 6 months and how many of them are going to stay for the foreseeable future. So that's sort of the biggest thing. And then the third thing is just the idea of there is this weird thing that we like to celebrate the individual artists and their vision. And what happens when all of a sudden we are trying to have backups and subs and standbys and understudies? And how can we fairly align our limited time and resources of space, rehearsal time with the director, the stage manager? It just feels like we've rewarded artists so much for their individual artistry, and we've gotten a huge benefit of being a platform for people and sharing in the bright light that emanates from their individual performances. But now that feels like, but then what does it mean if you just show up and there's a slip in your program saying the actor that you love the most is out and we have somebody else coming in? And how much time does that artist get to rehearse? It feels like the flip side of that, being able to be more supportive of artists as workers with other constraints on their time and lives. The flip side of that is, how do we do that, but in a little bit more mercenary way, but still position ourselves as the place where individual artists, we give them the place to be that creative mouthpiece. And I don't have an answer for that one either.
Thank you. And I think you guys are bringing up some great sort of challenges, and ones that I didn't even, I'm so delighted by sort of your different perspectives and what you're seeing and where you sit in your companies. And so I thank you for sharing. Okay, back to what I love the most, dreaming and visioning. What is one ambitious idea that we as a community can fight for? And I didn't give you this caveat, but you know, money is no object, human is no object. We have defeated COVID. We're in the future. We're like sort of thinking future wise. You know, what's something that we as a collective community can fight for, or ask for, or advocate for?
I can jump in. And I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, one, because, and it speaks very personally for me, is one thing that has happened, right, Michael? 100%. That's a given. I think I feel like what the Zoom room and what the digital space has created is like the breaking of an immense amount of like institutional barriers. I've been able to get in the proverbial room with people who, prior to the pandemic, I thought would take me 5 years to ever speak to them. And I don't think I'm the only one who's felt that way, that more doors have been opened, more avenues of approach have been opened because the pandemic equaled the playing field. We were all in the same space. The biggest theater in the area, we were all in the same spot as the most, you know, budding fringe company. And yeah, I mean, I was, you know, it gave us time to take meetings. I was able to meet with many of the people in the panel or in the audience right now, and in casual formats that would have been harder to coordinate just to get a coffee through email. And I hope that stays. I hope that these open channels stay. That these that what feels like open door policies continue to be open for uplifting new voices, for spotting, you know, up and coming talent, and to see where collaboration can happen. You know, collaboration doesn't have to happen at the same level. Collaboration can happen in the strangest ways, and we've all experienced that these really unique collaborations, they're fruitful. And I hope that creative problem solving doesn't end in the collaborative space.
Thank you.
I'll go next. I know you said think big beyond the pandemic, but I can't do that yet. But my one quick one is, I feel like, yeah, I feel the strain of like, well, I didn't go to medical school. I went to art school, but here I am making decisions about this. And I think that if it's not ever going to go away, if it's going to sink to the background level, the procurement of supplies and training needs to get way faster and easier, right? Like we all instinctively know that if like someone's just not washing the dishes in the green room sink, like that people are going to get sick. Like that's a health and safety problem, but the solution just sort of everybody knows. And it feels like, I mean, I'm looking into like getting emergency laboratory clearance for my employees so we can get the bulk tests that are at $2 each. Right. And I'm like, I don't even know if that's the right thing for me to do, but I'm going to try and do it. So if I feel like that some way that it's as easy as like, oh, here, fill out this tax form and then fill out this form for the test. And then the test kits are basically as easy to use as like a K-cup coffee machine. Like we're close to there, but the cost is still ridiculously high when multiplied by the number of days and number of people. So some way to get that into, I feel like recognize the reality that this needs to become a very commonplace workplace skill to manage this kind of workplace hazard. That feels like a dream to me right now. And then, yeah, I think long term, if there was some kind of funding to acknowledge the structure of the sort of artist wage versus the living wage in a city that's very, very expensive, coming somehow, any movement on that front is great. And we've had tremendous opportunities in the last 18 months. So don't get me wrong, many parts of our community have people in our community have individually responded. Grant making organizations have individually responded with tremendous generosity. But it still is, we have to go back to that cycle every year. We have to reapply for those grants every 2 years, right? That there's something about, the city of Boston is not getting any cheaper to live and work in, right? So is there, the more sort of, if there's like a bedrock universal income for arts organizations to cover the front end of then what the people they employ, that feels like that would be my big dream.
I love that. Dream big. Courtney.
Yeah, I'm gonna second what Paul just said. I think if I'm gonna dream big, it's really not even necessarily about only what we can do, but it's about the city of Boston and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and this, it's about the T being 24 hours and being more reliable. It's about childcare options being more prevalent for people. It's about healthcare being more affordable. It's about rents being stabilized so that we have more fiscally diverse people staying, so that we have different young artists coming out of school not being so quick to leave our neighborhoods in our city because they can't simply afford to stay here, because it is a daunting place to try and make a life. And then I think, that can go hand in hand with we as theater companies. I think right now, because of the pandemic, we're very focused on the fact that things are harder and longer, and we're showing great thought and care to our artists and how we schedule them and what time constraints we're putting on them, what a rehearsal day looks like. And I hope that we can continue that into the future, that we can recognize that people are, if we are not able to pay them Broadway level rates where they are able to actually make a year-round living doing this, then we have a responsibility to recognize what our position can and should be in their lives, and what we are asking of them as peoples, as parents, as family members, as employees, as human beings, what we are asking of them to give and to be responsible in what we are asking them. And I hope that that's something that we can carry into the future.
Thank you. I like these dreams. They're big, they're human. They are centered in making sure that we as all can come to the table with our needs met. I think these are great. Thank you. Thank you all so much. And those are the last of my questions. And so I just want to say thank you guys for your honesty and your generosity and sharing sort of your personal and sort of company experiences. All that information is so helpful. I know as a person who produces at the fringe level, I have been feeling the squeeze and the panic of running around trying to find COVID tests. And it is, although it is still hard, it is always nice to know that I'm not alone in that struggle, I'm not alone in that battle. And we as a community are so dedicated to moving as safely as we can. And that's really wonderful. And I really applaud you guys for the work and the efforts that you're doing and the way that you're thinking outside of the box. So I do want to, I'm trying to figure out which screen this is on. Note that we did ask for the community to submit some thoughts and questions, and these aren't necessarily for you to answer or for Michael or Cara or Emily to answer, but just things for us to maybe all think about. And I'm just going to bring to the table, and folks in the chat, feel free to respond. We have one artist statement where someone talked about accessibility features in theater arts programming have increased during the time where folks were producing virtually, which was super exciting. But we're also talking a lot of our language now is talking about going back to the way things were, getting back into the theater, sort of a return to normalcy. And as we return to some of that normalcy, we might be losing some of those accessibility measures that we gained during the pandemic, or the continuous access to accessible measures. And so this artist is sort of, as we think about going back to normal, like, let's not forget that part of that going back to normal is moving forward with some of the things that we learned in terms of making our theater accessible, not only to audience members, but for the artists that we were able to bring into the room and into the creative space. These are not criticism. These are just sort of sharing that information with you guys as well. Michael, you just gave me the eyebrow.
Yeah, because I think going back to normal would be a huge failure, and we would have learned nothing. I mean, the accessibility is a great thing for us. And also, like, y'all, when we make advances in technology, we don't go backwards. So, like, I'm not using my iPod Touch and my 8-track. Like, let's go forward with what we've learned. Let's figure out what the in-person / digital world looks like for the performing arts, because I'm telling you, we're just hearing today and yesterday about the sub-variant of Omicron, which is more contagious. So we still got 3, 4, 5 years of this. And so, like, I hate the word, like I said, I hate the word pivot, but we're going to be pivoting for a while now, but figure out more about how we can go more digital and incorporate that when consuming art in public spaces becomes safer. We're not going to abandon it. So dig in, find investments, apply for grants, think creatively, use the tools that we have as creators to create more user-friendly versions of what theater is in the future.
I would also like to add, Michael, that it's not like access for many people doesn't start when they walk into the theater. It's when they go to buy a ticket, when they're trying to get information for just to learn about our programming. So even taking it a step back to be like, how are we making the ability for people to get information about the work that we're doing as accessible as possible? And also, just on the flip side, like, we're creating accessible audiences, but how are we making sure that we're having that same sort of level of commitment to accessibility for the artists who need those measures? And how are we making it that they don't have to ask? Where is the implied access, right?
I hope everyone's asking those questions and coming up with action plans to assure that is happening, because if you're not, you are going to be losing your patrons faster than you can imagine. There's a whole world of people out there that have arts and culture inherent in who they are as people of color. There's your best option to grow your audiences. And again, the digital world assures us that everyone has a front row seat. Why would we get rid of that? Why go backwards? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. And then another sort of question / statement coming from the community is that some police departments have been running preparedness workshops for dealing with active shooters and other like disruptive instances and individuals, particularly for religious and political spaces. This organization has done bystander training with the BARCC, and it was helpful for general guidelines, but they're wondering if you're aware of, or ideally of any like non-police based training or guidelines available for helping theaters, particularly to help prepare for disruptive or violent incidences, or if there are other organizations that they know who'd be interested in facilitating type programs. This is more of a question. I think that this is something we talk about, where, trying to make while like, they know that like that training was super, super helpful, but like, what are other alternative methods? Like, what are the ways that we can sort of think outside of what's initially there? So question for you to think about and chew on. Thank you. To think about and chew on as you sort of think about other things that sort of are coming up for the community. Those are two things I had. Let me like take a scoot through the chat and see if there are any questions that have come up that we may have missed. and also invite anyone who's on the call and in attendance who has questions. Feel free to like throw your question in the chat, and happy to ask that. Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
I'm going to jump in for just a moment also while we wait for any more questions. We asked our community to send in any kind of individual artist statements and didn't really hear much back from folks. So I wanted to take a moment to just talk from that perspective, as so much of our community is freelance. And I notice a lot of the people on this call, and in these calls previously, it was very much focused on theater companies. There's so much focus on funding for organizations, because I think in some ways it's a lot easier to target, and it's a smaller pool of people. However, as we've just heard, companies are running smaller cast shows, although with understudies, there's a few more opportunities there, but we're still looking at a lot less employment for our members, for individual artists. And I just want to point that out and make sure, especially that our government policymakers are keeping in mind all of the challenges of freelance artists, who, as Paul pointed out, are usually making less money when they're working as artists than they are the rest of the time. They're losing money to do this work. And yet their work is the key part of our theater productions. So keeping in mind, especially folks who have any kind of disability that or medical needs that are keeping them from being in person, or who have kids under 5, especially, who are really unable to be in person, and or are just not part of the casting pool that is being utilized mostly right now. That these folks still have a lot of all of these intersectional needs that we've talked about in terms of transit and childcare and universal basic income are so crucial to our independent artists. Is there anyone on the call as an independent artist who would like to share anything about their perspective? You can say something in the chat or raise your hand. Lindsay Allen Cox. Hello, my friend. Give me just a second. I believe I can promote you. Allowed to talk. There we are. Lindsay, are you with us?
I am. Hey, y'all.
Hey, Lindsay.
Hey, greetings. I'm here with a broken finger. You guys know I always have something to say, so I will just jump in. As an individual artist who also works for arts organizations, or it does and has worked for nonprofit arts organizations in the past, it's like a double whammy. And I mean, I keep thinking I'm on edge, right? If my upcoming production is canceled or postponed or whatever, it's almost a matter of like whether or not I can pay my rent to stay in my apartment. And I think that thank God for TCBF being willing to support artists during this tough time. But I think, even though we're not in the same type of crises that we were in 2020, that working artists still need that support that we were getting from the city and the state. And, it feels, I guess, even more dire now for some reason. I'm not entirely sure why, but it feels like a much more dire situation. I think maybe because things felt like we were on the upswing, and then here we are again, sort of back at square one. And sitting on both sides of that, right, as an artist myself, and then also working over at Actors Shakespeare Project and seeing the impact that having to postpone or delay productions has on folks' ability to literally pay their bills, because every dime I make is accounted for. So if for some reason the Huntington couldn't move forward with our Daughters Like Pillars, I don't know how I would survive in the spring. So it's hard. And I think I came in on the tail end of what Courtney was saying, but it's getting harder and harder and harder to stay here in Boston and to work here. And I think part of that is like the effects of COVID and just like work being less frequent for so many of us. But I think it's also just extremely expensive to live here now. And it's just getting harder and harder by the year. So, but I'm hopeful that I get to see some of your faces soon. I love this community and I miss you all very much.
Thank you, Lindsay.
I can tell you a little bit about what we're planning at Mass Cultural Council. So a couple of things. One is that this is a great opportunity to share your thoughts about this with Mass Cultural Council for how we allocate the ARPA dollars. I'm pretty confident we're going to have money set aside for individual artists. $60 million is a lot of money for us to move, so I don't think that money will be available until the fall, but we're going to try to get it out as fast as possible. So that's one. Hearing from you about that in volume will help us make those decisions. Two, currently our individual artist grants are really designated for the creators of art and not necessarily the performers who perform the art that is created. And so I had the team looking at really opening that up, because at the moment, the only individual artist that can apply for those grants from us in theater is a playwright, not the director, not the designer, not the actor. So we want to open that up some. And also, as we look at opening it up, make sure we are making grant money available for people that aren't artists but work in the cultural sector, like backstage people or people that hang lights and stuff like that. So keep a lookout for that. We'll have a public input session on some of the changes we're going to be making. But that money is unrestricted, which is kind of cool. So you can use it for whatever you want to use it for. And I'm trying to make most of our money sort of really unrestricted to help. These are relatively smallish grants. They're large, but they're small when it comes to like the salary you need to live. But they're $5,000 to $15,000 grants. So again, we need to hear from you. I can't do my job well unless I hear from you. Don't feel like you're bothering me. Please let me know what you think so I can share it with the whole team.
And I'd love to add from the city of Boston side of things. I mentioned at the top of the meeting that we had over 400 applications for our individual artist fund. A lot of those are for professional development opportunities or career opportunities, people paying themselves usually, or paying to participate in something where there's more economic opportunity for them. And that's, I think there's a couple of things that were mentioned today that it's good that we have that fund and that it's not restricted and it's open to anyone who self-identifies as an artist or creative worker, but it's not multi-year. It's not a huge amount of money. And so one idea that somebody mentioned that has been kind of explored internally is the guaranteed income pilot. We've seen different pilot programs around the country that included artists as a population who would be receiving guaranteed income. I think it would be a big push to get that done, but I also don't think that it's something that is a pipe dream or totally off the table. And it would be something that's worth advocating for. And just I think also goes to some of the points that were made about like what is the actual cost of what we're doing? No one's paying themselves enough. There isn't enough support for anything that needs, that you need in order to actually do your work. Another like not snapping back to how things were before point is that we now understand maybe better what we actually need to get paid in order to be sustained as people and in the work that we're doing together. And I think looking at these other areas that, increasing salaries and getting more sustainable funding for the work of organizations, but also things like affordable housing, things like guaranteed income, these other policy areas where artists could really be organized, or the arts community could be really organized, and also understand what's happening in those areas already and getting involved there is super helpful and helps move all of the work forward for everybody. Because the living expense situation in Boston is not changing anytime soon. And we've got to find a way to make it sustainable for people to be here.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for your input and thoughtful care. I thought we might have time for one more question.
I was going to say, just sort of going back to this question as we're thinking about, as sort of Lindsay was sort of proposing is, how with all of the things that are sort of coming or not coming towards us, how are we supporting sort of the individual artists, the folks who may be not necessarily in line for some of the grant funding, or it doesn't trickle down sort of as easily as we'd hope. Sort of just throwing that back out there for Emily. I saw your message.
Yeah. If I would say, I want to just like double snaps on everything that Cara said and that Michael said around, really sort of organizing and pivoting around these pieces that actually are game changers, right? Like they're not like Band-Aids, they're actual game changers. And then this other piece about the intersectional policy asks, right? Like Courtney, I really appreciated what you said, like affordable housing is an arts issue. Transportation is an arts issue. And if we aren't willing to stand up and join in affordable housing advocacy efforts that are out there, do you know which community development corporation you are a part of, right? Or like what footprint is your nearest community development corporation? If you're not following the transportation story and figuring out ways to engage with like T for Mass or other organizations, they are not going to show up when we need their help either. And it benefits all of us. So, I think I'm asking for more time, which no one has, but I think it's like we need to stop sort of living siloed. And I think, as Armando pointed out, there's been a lot of equalizing and opportunities to rethink our relationships and our positionality, and we should continue to live into that and breathe into that. And I think organizations need to stick up for individual artists and like show up in different ways for individual artists. I think there have been some amazing examples. But I think when it comes to advocacy and policy, like that's a place where we could continue to do some work, and which I'm excited to do.
Yeah, funding's not going to fix those bigger issues, friends. Sad to tell you that it's not going to fix it. There will be little band-aids. It has to be policy work, which means that all of you have to become artist advocates. And I'm not saying spend 3 hours a week. I'm saying find a half hour to find out what's going on and reach out to Emily or me to say, what can I do? Or reach out to a legislator to say, hey, have you thought about this? But we need your help. There's only 2 of us, it's 3 of us. They need to hear from like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of you all.
Absolutely. I know during the pandemic, I got in touch with my local city clerk, and now I work every city local election, and I actually really love it. It's a lot of fun. But during those days, I get to meet all the candidates because they bring us pizza and donuts, right? And I get to spend a lot of time talking to people about and helping people just vote. And it's been a lot of fun in sort of keeping me engaged with the process, because now I know the governor race is coming up. So I've already emailed the clerk and said, I better be down on your list to come and work so I can, be involved and be there to sort of help people. And Armando, I vote in Chelsea. That's where I grew up. And so it's super exciting. They also pay you really well to do the work, and everyone there is really nice, dedicated. And with this upcoming race, they're going to need a lot of help. And I think that artists and stage managers, that's a really easy way where it's a one-time commitment to sort of get engaged with the process, support it, advocate for its ability to happen. Really, really great things. And you don't have to live in a town to vote to help with the elections. So, if that some elections are happening on different days, you can work in a few different cities. They're always looking for help, and they pay very well. Thank you all. I feel like it is our time. We're almost at the end of our time here at 12:30, and I want to respect the fact that we all have other things to do in order to keep making the work happen. Jen, do you want to kick it off? Do you want me to send us all off?
I just wanted to say thank you all for coming and asking good questions and continuing to think about the community. And as Michael said about his work, we at StageSource are our members, and we need to hear from you also. If there are projects that you'd like to see us help to kick off, let us know. TCBF, the Theater Community Benevolent Fund, was something that started with StageSource long ago and has kind of branched off. But what are the things that we can, the resources we can connect people to? Because we are incredibly strong, creative individuals and have lots of ideas and really like to hear from each other. So thank you all to our panelists and our speakers today. We will be in touch, and I hope everyone has a joyous day.